Would you let Jeffrey Epstein watch your kids? Didn't think so. What about his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell? Hard pass. So why trust him? Mark Carney, Maxwell's friend, not yours.
Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show, take two. This is where I get a second day during the week on these Fridays to kind of wrap up, round up, talk about what's going on in this election so far. We're through a full second week of campaigning, and boy, it's got stupid, weird, odd, and depressing. But we'll see. There's still 2.5, 3 weeks almost left to go on this thing, and we will see what happens. And this show is live. I see a few of you checking in already. E Sharp, Wild Rose, and Shaunavision saying good afternoon. So I'm going to assume you're out east. Wish you the best in this election. I wish you guys might reconsider some of your voting patterns. If you're watching this show, chances are you're probably not a liberal, but you never know. I can't presume. So yeah, I got quite a lineup today. Quite a few guests coming on. I'm going to have Franco Terrazzano, the Taxpayers Federation, coming on a little bit. Jay Hill, former Conservative House Leader, is going to talk some politics, of course, with us. James Snell, our Alberta Bureau Chief, is going to give the Alberta perspective on what's going on in this election. And then Peter Coleman of the National Citizens Coalition is going to round it all out. So we got a lot of ground to cover today, guys, and a lot of stuff to talk about. So that's fine. Show would get dull if I ran out of that. We don't have to worry about it. I'm a blowhard. I've always got lots to talk about. So use that comment scroll. I see Jordan there too. This is live, interactive, and this one doesn't even get rebroadcast to TV like my other shows. So we can be a little less constrained on things on here, but we still got to keep things civil. All right, let's start things out though by seeing what's top in the news today and check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor. So, hey Dave.
Hey Cory, good morning.
Good day.
How come you get two microphones? I only get one.
Because there's just so much bloviating coming from here that some might just overwhelm it and get on.
Well, I want two microphones.
Well, you have to take that up with our producer.
Well, I'm going to go to the senior executives. Oh, wait a minute, I am a senior executive.
Yes,
So.
I'm just a part-timer.
Exactly. So, end of week 2 on the campaign. Certainly an interesting week. Where do you want to start? Why don't we start with polls?
Sure.
We had a poll last night from Abacus, which is a respected polling firm, and another one this morning showing Tories have crept ahead. So there's some hope.
I didn't catch the Abacus one. There's another one I have, actually. I gave John the image, Innovative. I'm not sure what those guys, but they're not a familiar pollster to me. But that one showed a Conservative lead by a point, anyways, which is as good as they've hoped for in this last while.
It's a start, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
Hopefully, as you know, as your show is titled, hopefully the bleeding has stopped.
well, something from David Coletto with Abacus is interesting. He pointed out the polling midway through the 2015 election had the Conservatives leading the Liberals by 1 point at that point. And of course, we know by the end of the 2015 election, the Liberals had won a majority. So halfway through an election doesn't necessarily show where an election is going to end. A lot can change in that.
No, but hopefully it's a harbinger of the future. So I think as we talked about earlier, I think it's going to come down to the debates. They are going to be so crucial. As we know, Mark Carney is not overly proficient in French, so that'll hamper him. And we've seen several years of Pierre Poilievre in the House of Commons just carving up the Liberals. So I look forward to his performance in the debates.
Yeah, I see Jordan, actually, one of our commenters, saying the same thing. He's saying, looking forward to seeing if the debates swing the polls. So, maybe that's a lot of people are hanging on. I mean, they really don't know Carney well. There's that point where a lot of even indifferent Canadians make a habit. Okay, I'll sit down for an hour and a half and stare at these people and get to know them for a little while.
Yeah, it's good to see Jordan and I have the same mindset. Anyways.
Yes.
So obviously, I think the big news this week, tariffs, everything around tariffs and the Mad Orangemen tariffing the world, and including some uninhabited islands that their poor penguins got tariffed. So great memes of them coming back to get Trump. So Carney took some time off the campaign trail and formulated Canada's response, which was 25% retaliatory on any sort of American automobile products. And I think both the party leaders, opposition party leaders, Polyev and Singh, were probably in agreement with that. They sort of said that they would do something similar. So, you know what? The stock markets are plunging. Poor Nigel's retirement fund is going to have to be working to 95 now. So it's still going to take several days of a shakedown until we figure it out.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, I've been watching the discussion online from supporters of Trump. Fair enough. Oh, it's going to be the short-term pain for long-term gain. Guys, I just wish, don't listen to Trump. Listen to some economists. Just check out some people who are the dorks who dig into that, because no, you can't tariff yourself wealthy. It's not going to be short-term pain. It's
No.
going to be just pain.
No.
But I guess, like anyone else, we seem to learn things the hard way.
Yep. Can you say recession?
Yeah, it's looking at that.
Today has already been busy. Mark Carney held a press conference in Quebec to say he's going to give the CBC even more money.
To
Come
produce
on.
stuff that nobody's watching.
Yeah,
anyway.
to produce stuff so he's going to give them an extra $150 million on top of their 1.3 or 1.4 billion that they already get. And he's blaming Trump because, that we've got to protect our Canadian identity. And
Of course.
the one thing that CBC does is protect our Canadian identity. And so there you go, more money for the state broadcaster.
Oh, good. I'm thrilled. They haven't made anything good since the Beachcombers.
No, exactly. I loved Relic. He was great.
Oh, he was. Yes. No, there was good content.
There
back then.
was.
I mean, it was, but it was a different era. We've got to accept that. Even the
That's
Littlest
true.
Hobo when I was a kid. Hey, great stuff. But
Yep.
those days
Yeah,
are done.
it's all good. Also in Quebec today was Polyev, and he made an announcement on domestic violence, basically. Intimate partner violence. Says things like, if he's elected, that if you're charged with intimate violence and intimate partner violence and you get bail, you get an ankle bracelet so the cops can keep an eye on you. And he's going to make intimate partner murder basically a right away first degree murder charge. None of this manslaughter, crime of passion stuff. So he was strong on domestic violence today.
Well, and crime doesn't make election issues federally nearly enough. And I mean, I'm glad he's addressing it, and because it shows that he's addressing based on principle, not on internals or polling. Because as much as citizens get upset between elections on crime, they never seem to make it an election issue. So I'm glad Polyev was bringing it up.
Well, I think we're all upset with this catch and release stuff, and how many times have we written stories on offenders being released back into the community, and days later they're already back in the slammer. So it's I agree, it's an important issue. Now the funniest story of the week: the NDP porn scandal.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, I mean, this is just like gold, Jerry, gold. Jagmeet was interviewed by a porn star from OnlyFans. One who was pouring milk all over herself and all that sort of stuff, and she was actually on the campaign bus until it was pointed out by the media that hey, you might want to rethink this.
I mean, it's one thing to do an odd, side podcast interview, but when they're joining you on the campaign bus, like they got a poll on the bus or something, or
Yeah, they must have good point. This porn producer is so weird. She did. We've got a story up on the site today. When she was pregnant, she went and got an abortion pill, and had an abortion. And she put the fetus in a jar, and was like displaying the fetus on camera and all that sort of stuff. Which could get her in legal trouble because it's a crime to commit an indignity against a body, and apparently fetuses are classified as human remains. So this is the type of mentality that Jagmeet seems to attract. The big story on our site all week has been one by Sean Polzer called Pipeline Paradoxy, in which Brookfield Investments, who, as you know, was until recently chaired by one Mark Carney, is in the process of buying a $10 billion pipeline in the United States. So it's the same Mark Carney that says he's going to keep Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill. Yet his business, which he still owns millions of dollars worth of shares in, is buying up pipelines. Like, what's going on?
Well, I mean, it's almost a show on its own. Like some of the older discussion, though, we've had some strange funding to the anti-pipeline activists and groups that keeps pouring out through Tides and other, American groups to try and shut down Canadian oil and gas development. People have found that there's sometimes, if you trace it far enough, American oil company interests. Of course, they don't want Canada developing more of this stuff, so they're sort of incentivized to shut down Canadian stuff. Now, whether or not that ties all the way around to Carney, who knows? But I mean, when you're running millions in a pipeline in the United States and then you're opposing a pipeline in Canada, kind of smells funny.
It does smell a little funny. We've got a couple stories up on a column from Brian Giesbrecht on Mark Carney's father, who was a teacher in the residential school systems way back in the day. And somebody's uncovered an old CBC recording from decades and decades ago of Mark Carney talking about the retardation of Negro children.
His father.
Sorry, his father. Yes, sorry. Retardation of Negro children and how they want to teach Indigenous kids life skills and whatnot so they can go back to the reserve, prepared to deal with the future. So it's an interesting, it's sort of it's a story like, okay, you decide whether Mark Carney's father was a racist or whether he was just ahead of his time. So I invite everybody to go on there. And this weekend, Polyev is BC bound, and he's got a morning event tomorrow in Osoyoos. Then he moves on to beautiful Penticton for a big rally, and apparently they've rented out one of the biggest places in Penticton because I'm sure they'll get thousands and thousands of people there. And our own Jared Yager will be in attendance. He'll be covering him all weekend, right through till Sunday, where he's supposed to have an announcement in Vancouver. So,
right on. Well,
no weekend for Jared.
No, but hey, come on, he's touring BC.
He's a kid.
Yeah. Fine. I can think of worse things to do than be hanging around the Okanagan, where I'm sure spring is already sprouting, where we're just watching the sno melt.
Exactly. He's probably staying in the Best Western in Osoyoos. So he'll have.
Oh no, he's working for the Standard. I'm sure he's something less than that. But he's young. He can take
tent on the side of the road. So that's the week summed up.
Right on. Well, thanks, Dave. I'll let you get into run up the weekend content for Friday and talk to you after the show.
You bet. Thanks, Cory.
Right on. Thanks. That is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And yes, we got people going out there covering this stuff across the country as it happens. And lots of interesting stories, from the funny to the depressing to the serious. It's all out there. This time I'd like to remind you, though, the reason we can do it, we don't get hundreds of millions like the bloody CBC. No, we rely on sponsorship and subscriptions. So it keeps us independent, and it's so, so important. I mean, as I've seen some of you guys talking, the media is just not giving you a good picture. If you haven't subscribed yet, get on there. westernstandard.news/subscription. It's $10 a month, $100 for a year. Get that volume discount. Take advantage of it. Smart shopping. It's the way to go. And it helps us keep getting those reporters out there talking about the stories the legacy media is too cowardly to cover and giving you a good, clear interpretation of things. So if you subscribed already, again, thank you guys. We really do appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, come on, get in there. And hey, share it, get it out there. Get other people on board. Buy a subscription for your liberal uncle. Drive him crazy. It's important, and it helps us. All right, let's get on to our first guest here. I got, like I said, quite a bit of a lineup of them this week. We got Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and he's got a lot of work to do trying to convince a whole lot of candidates to try and be financially responsible. It's quite a monumentous task. So, hey there, Franco. How's it going?
Hey, Cory. It's going great, man. Great to be on the show with you.
Yeah, well, it's about time. It's been like weeks.
Well, hey, there's no shortage of the government soaking taxpayers, so we always have a lot to say.
Yeah, well, and it's great. No, and I'm glad to have you on again. It's always great to have you on, and with what you guys are doing to try and hold them all to account. Something I noticed, and it's not unusual. The first week of this campaign has been, the first week in carrying on. Promises, tax cut promises, which are fantastic. But there's also been a lot of spending promises, and I haven't heard much for cutting anywhere. So where's this going to balance?
Well, that's a great question, right? Because we already know that the Trudeau government in less than a decade doubled the entire federal debt, right? And now interest charges on the debt are costing taxpayers more than $1 billion every week. Now, Cory, think about it. What's $1 billion, right? That is the cost of building a brand new hospital, but that money's gone. It's going to the bond fund managers on Bay Street. So Canadians are losing a lot out of this. And like, let me just put it into context one more time here, right? Like, welcome to Canada, folks, where every dollar you pay in federal sales tax is going to pay interest on the federal debt. So look, it's good that we're seeing parties try to duel over who can cut taxes the most on income taxes. I got to say, you know, Poilievre is promising twice as much income tax cuts as Carney. So, hey, look, it's good to see them cutting taxes, but especially Carney, we haven't heard a single thought out of him on where he's going to cut some wasteful spending. At least Mr. Poilievre, while we're still waiting for the full details, is talking about shrinking the size and cost of the federal bureaucracy, which the cost has gone up like 73% since 2016. It's gross. He's talking about cutting back the taxpayer costs of all this consultants, right? Talking about cutting back all the wasteful spending going overseas. So we definitely need to see more on the savings side. And we also need to see more on the tax cut side because, look, people are struggling, the economy's struggling, and the way we're going to get Canada firing on all cylinders again is by massive tax cuts and big time cuts to these onerous regulations.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I guess getting into the T word that we've been hearing throughout this election has been tariffs, and there's a lot of confusion, I think, on people's part of what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax, and they're using that tax on both sides of the border as their swords as they battle with each other. But I think all of the Canadian public, if you're cheering on Trump's tariffs or if you're cheering on retaliating tariffs, better understand that you're always the one who's going to pay for them.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't be more spot on. Look, you know who likes tariffs? The people who want more government control, more government intervention. You know who loses out on tariffs? The forgotten class, right? The ordinary working Americans and Canadians who are going to be the ones who take it on the chin. And look, like let's like put it on the record right here. A tariff is a tax. So when Mr. Trump imposes tariffs, what he's doing is he's putting a tax on American businesses, which then pass on higher prices to American consumers. Well, the converse is also true, right? When our own federal government in Ottawa hits back with knee-jerk retaliatory tariffs, well, that's a tax on Canadian businesses, which means higher prices for Canadian consumers, right? At the end of the day, look, if Washington, D.C. wants to hammer Americans with new and higher taxes, it doesn't mean that Ottawa should then hammer Canadians with new and higher taxes.
It's kind of a race to the bottom. I see one of the commenters saying the usual thing, though, until they produce their products in America. But that strategy of trying to tax yourself into domestic viability has never traditionally worked in any countries. I mean, and people keep saying short-term pain for long-term gain. It's not going to happen. They're just going to pay more money.
Yeah, I mean, look, higher taxes isn't going to help your economy. It's just that simple, right? It's going to allow governments to intervene more into the economy. In fact, what we should be doing is the exact opposite. We should be cutting the red tape, the regulation, the roadblocks to major natural resource projects. We should be cutting the massive tax burden that Canadians are facing. That is the long-term strategy to help the economy, but more to the point, to help Canadians, right? I mean, like, look at it this way, Cory. I know you and your audience know this very personally, but, you know, since 2015, we have seen $670 billion in major natural resource projects either stalled or canceled. How about we just be able to build stuff here in Canada without the government soaking taxpayers through all these different subsidies? Like, look, taxes are not a short-term or a long-term strategy to actually help the people, right? Taxes help the fat cat government bureaucrats and politicians who are going to spend your money. If we want to talk about helping ordinary people, ordinary Canadians, we got to talk about letting ordinary Canadians keep more of their own hard-earned money.
So getting back to that, the carbon tax, the consumer portion, it looks like it appears to be gone. The Liberals, at least pragmatically enough, even though before they said, you know, the world was going to burn and people were, you know, all going to suffer if we didn't have that consumer carbon tax. Suddenly they've decided, no, we don't need that consumer carbon tax. But the industrial carbon tax is going to go up if they get their way.
Well, you know what, Cory? I'm so glad you brought that up. And look, we got a new book coming out here, Axing the Tax, my first book, The Rise and Fall of Canada's Carbon Tax. It's coming out April 10th. You can get it right now on Amazon. And look, one of the reasons I wrote this book, Cory, is for that exact reason you brought up. Because look, Canadians did a ton of work going to rallies, organizing advocacy campaigns, right? Emailing politicians. So ordinary Canadians essentially forced the Liberal government to at least back down on its consumer carbon tax. But, you know, Cory, as you mentioned, the fight against carbon taxes is far from over, right? So all the government has done so far under Prime Minister Mark Carney is set the carbon tax rate to zero. But the carbon tax law is still on the books. So after the election, you could get these politicians going back to the House of Commons and they can just crank that carbon tax right back up. But more to the point, Cory, Carney isn't scrapping carbon taxes. To use his own word, he wants to change it, right? He just doesn't want you to see the consumer facing carbon tax. So what Carney wants to do is he wants to hammer Canadian businesses with huge hidden carbon taxes, and he hopes you won't notice when they pass some of those costs on to you through higher prices. But folks, it's even worse than that. Because remember, no matter who is in the White House, they're not imposing carbon taxes. The Democrats didn't do it. Trump didn't do it. I don't think Trump's ever going to impose a carbon tax on the United States. So what a Canadian carbon tax on Canadian businesses means, it's going to push Canadian businesses to cut production in Canada and set up shop south of the border. So Carney's hidden carbon tax on business is the worst of all worlds. It means higher prices for Canadians, less production in Canada, and fewer jobs for us Canadians.
Well, some people have made the case, and I've looked it up, and it's baloney, but either way, you could expand on it more, I'm sure. They're saying, well, Canada, if it doesn't have a carbon tax, will be put at a trade disadvantage because so many collectives like the EU and others will refuse to buy our goods if we aren't kicking ourselves in the nuts with a carbon tax.
Okay, that doesn't even muster 1 second of critical thinking. Okay, so folks, think about it this way. They are arguing that the federal government should hit all Canadians with carbon taxes in the off chance that some countries impose carbon tax tariffs when some of our businesses sell some of their goods to those countries, right? So they want to hammer everyone with carbon taxes in the off chance that some of our businesses face some carbon tax tariffs when they sell some of their goods abroad. It makes absolutely no sense, okay? But let me expand on that. Here's another thing. The vast majority of countries don't impose national carbon taxes. Okay, the World Bank's own data shows that about 70% of countries don't have national carbon taxes. Okay, that even includes 4 of the 5 largest emitters, India, Russia, Brazil, and the United States. And the US is who we still sell the bulk of our goods to. Okay, so none of this makes any sense. Here's what's going on. Here's what those spinners, those carbon tax activists are doing. They lost the argument on the environment because the carbon tax doesn't work to help the environment. Okay, they lost the argument on affordability because obviously the carbon tax makes the necessities of living in Canada more expensive. So after having lost all of the other arguments, they're now going through their bag of phony baloney tricks to try to convince Canadians on another front. But look, that argument that we need a carbon tax here in Canada to escape some carbon tax tariffs in other countries, like that doesn't make any sense. Why would the federal government hammer all Canadians with a carbon tax in the hypothetical chance that in the future, some Canadian businesses would be affected by carbon tax tariffs when they sell some of their goods?
Well, and that's it. And as you pointed out, 70% of countries don't have a bloody carbon tax. China is one of the biggest exporters in the world, if not the biggest exporter in the world. Countries are still buying their products despite their lack of carbon tax, likewise with the United States. And we really need to be, we should be streamlining our country. We're realizing we don't have as stable a trading partner to the south as we thought we did. Well, we'd better be as productive and efficient as humanly possible. And a carbon tax is just an economy killer.
Yeah, totally. Especially when you think of what is probably the worst country in the world to have a carbon tax? Canada. And if it's not the worst country, it's one of the top worst countries to impose a carbon tax. Like, folks, newsflash, Canada is a very cold place. Okay, so a carbon tax hurts us very much when we have to stay warm or when businesses have to have natural gas so that their customers don't freeze, right? Canada is a very big place. You got to fuel up your car to get to work. Truckers have to fuel up their big rigs with diesel to get stuff from point A to point B. Not only that, but Canada has a very natural resource intensive economy, and the carbon tax is kicking our industries in the teeth, right? So if there was any country out there where the carbon tax would be the worst idea, it would be right here in Canada.
So, I mean, I understand we're on the same page with a lot of things. Pretty much most taxes are bad ideas for the most part. We want them minimized. Capital gains came up. And it looks like suddenly that's not one of the best taxes in the world as well. The government, even Carney, has admitted, because that's a just terribly destructive tax as well. I mean, what worse to disincentivize it than people investing and trying to build enterprise? What was the Taxpayers Federation's take on that?
Yeah, cut capital gains taxes. I mean, it's a horrible tax. I mean, look, it is a financial sucker punch to people who worked hard their whole lives to save for their retirement, build a business, or invest in other properties. It's a financial sucker punch. But not only that, like, look, it is such a discouragement. Okay, think about it this way. Think what a capital gains tax hike would do. You're essentially telling that young, smart graduate from a Canadian university who wants to build the next Google in Canada to leave Canada and set up shop in another country. And like, look, we all know that capital gains taxes are absolutely devastating if you're like in terms of trying to attract and keep investment or to allow people to build a business. But there's two other points here. Number one, let's just look at the data. Okay, well, Canada taxes capital gains well above the OECD average. Okay, well above our industrialized peers. Now, if you're looking at a competitive tax system, here are the things that make countries' tax systems more competitive. Number one, they have flat or relatively flat income taxes. Okay. Number two, they have low business taxes. Well, Canada essentially does the exact opposite. We have a very uncompetitive tax system. Our governments are absolutely money hungry, thirsty for more of other people's money. And that's one of the reasons, among others, like roadblocking development, as why Canada is struggling economically right now. But here's the second point. A lot of Canadians who work outside of government, like they're the ones who don't have the taxpayer funded pension, right? The golden pension. Government bureaucrats, golden pension. Politicians, golden pension, paid for by the taxpayer. Well, doctors, small business owners, people who just invest in a secondary property, that is their retirement. That is their nest egg for their golden years. And that is the people that are going to get absolutely clobbered by high capital gains taxes here in Canada.
All right. Well, before I let you go, I mean, just one more time, are you going to have like some sort of formal book launch event or something going on there on the 10th?
Well, so on the 10th, we're going to be in Ottawa at the Strong and Free Conference. We'll have some books available there. But then starting the next week, folks, we're going to be on a little bit of a book tour. Okay, so stay tuned for details of that. We're going to be in Calgary at some point as well. But folks, get the book, Axing the Tax, The Rise and Fall of Canada's Carbon Tax. It's on Amazon right now, coming out April 10th. And folks, it is the book that the carbon taxers don't want you to read.
Excellent. I appreciate it, Marco. I just, as a side note before I let you go, and kind of showing my age and how long the Taxpayers Federation's been at, but there was a book I bought when I was in my late 20s that really did impact me. It was called Tax Me, I'm Canadian by Mark Milkey, and He was heading the Taxpayers Federation back then. You guys really do important work just to help people with their economic literacy, so I hope the book's a bestseller, and I hope maybe some of our people in power learn from it too.
Hey, me too, Cory. And hey, thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Great. Thanks, Franco. I'll talk to you again soon. All right, Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And yes, Axing the Tax. It's going to be a great book, guys. Make sure. There we go. Kenzie's got a pre-order in for it already. And Jordan, yeah, I knew you were asking questions about Mexico and sovereign default. It's just that would be subject matter for an entirely different show. But they're good questions, absolutely. But we do only have so much time. And again, today's packed. I got a great guest lineup. So I'm going to move right into the next one. I see Jay Hill in the lobby there. Hey, Jay, how you doing?
Terrific, Cory. How about yourself?
I'm all right, but I'm not enjoying that weather. You're still sucking in down there in Arizona.
Down south of the border, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was there in January, but not for long enough.
Patriotic Canadians, apparently, according to Trudeau.
Yeah, well, we don't take much of what Mr. Trudeau says very seriously. So, I mean, boy, interesting political times. Probably Good to keep you from the stressful insanity, kind of watching from a distance, but we really need your input on some of this. This campaign has really not been going as a lot of people would have hoped with the Conservatives.
Well, of course, the interesting question, I think, for all of us, Cory, is how accurate are those polls that consistently have shown and continue to show that Carney's going to win a majority government? A lot of people are having a lot of problems believing those polls. I saw a story a day or two ago where a pollster was actually questioning his own poll results. So we'll have to see, I guess. And for Westerners, largely at least, we keep holding our breath and hoping for the best.
Yeah, so something that's kind of started to come up throughout this race, and you mentioned it earlier when you were chatting, Preston Manning popped up and spoke, and I think accurately, maybe some people didn't want that question coming into this campaign, but all the same, there's some truth to it. Canada's unity is kind of at stake here.
Big time. And, I applaud my former leader, Preston Manning, and his thoughts about this, and sort of, issuing a bit of a warning to voters that might not do the research necessary before they cast their ballot. He said, and I'm going to quote from his guest column, he said, "A vote for Carney is a vote for Western secession, a vote for the breakup of Canada." Now, of course, since then, I think it was yesterday that Poilievre was asked about it, and he tried to distance himself a little bit from those comments. And, he talked about how he believes in the unity of the country. And then more recently, when Carney was asked about it, he said, well, Preston Manning's comments were, quote, unhelpful and dramatic. Well, I would suggest to Mr. Carney and anyone else that takes exception to these comments by Preston that they're supposed to be dramatic, because they're supposed to be a wake-up call that a lot of Westerners in particular, but I think given the tremendous showing of support at these rallies, right from Newfoundland to British Columbia and points in between, thousands upon thousands of people are showing up to hear Pierre Poilievre's vision for where he would take Canada if he was fortunate enough to be elected and get a majority mandate. So I think the comments are supposed to be dramatic. I think that voters should do some research, take a look at even excerpts from Mr. Carney's book, and learn about his views of how he intends to govern, given the opportunity. And if that doesn't scare the hell out of them, I don't know what will.
Well, and you're a veteran of a number of campaigns. Something no campaigner really wants, though, putting on the campaign type hat, aside from what's right or wrong, is external events impacting the campaign, because you can't control them. You have to react to them rather than, being the person driving the events. And I could see frustration for Mr. Poilievre when he's trying to do a national campaign, and Premier Smith, who, again, I agree with where she's coming from and what she's saying, or again, Preston Manning, he's absolutely right with what he's saying, but boy, it kind of throws something into the punch bowl when those comments come up and they're trying to focus on policy, releases. How does Mr. Poilievre deal with this?
Well, I think he's dealing with it the proper way for a person in his position. You've just encapsulated, Cory, I think, the dilemma that he has. I think that Pierre probably believes that Manning and Danielle Smith and Scott Moe in Saskatchewan are accurately portraying a large segment of the Western population when they view that another Liberal win, I might add, the fourth government in a row, should Carney win, is just completely opposite to the direction that the majority of Westerners want to see our country go in. We believe very strongly that under Trudeau, and with the support and advice from Mark Carney, they have all but destroyed the economy, in particular of Western Canada, but the entire nation. And if the polls are to be believed at all, the people that are going to vote for Carney had better at least do the research necessary before they mark their ballot, or we're going to see widespread, from coast to coast to coast, regret and buyer's remorse shortly after the election, if Mr. Carney wins. And that will also be manifested, I believe, in the situation with Western secession. I think that Westerners have had enough of Liberals, at least for a while, and they want to see some common sense government return to our nation.
Yeah, when polls have traditionally underestimated Conservative support, both sides of the border, even in municipal and provincial elections, there's been a lot of that happening. But there's still some interesting trends happening right now, and it's just that Trump factor that nobody really prepared for. And what I think it's led to is just my interpretation, because something we're seeing in the polls, which is really interesting, though terrifying in a way. I believe people really rally the troops when they feel that there's been an external threat. So they're kind of going to what they feel is comfortable or stable. And that's why the Bloc has plummeted in the polls and the NDP have plummeted. People who would vote on principle for side issues feel that there's a bigger threat coming from south of the border and they'd better move to the center to grab that to head it off. And that's, again, something that Poilievre can't counter very easily.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, we all know that traditionally, whether it was the Reform Party originally and then the Canadian Alliance and then the merger of the Canadian Alliance and Progressive Conservatives that produced the existing Conservative Party of Canada, there's always been one party that I would argue of common sense, support for smaller government and larger private employment in our nation. And all the other parties are of the left, of some form of socialism, bigger government programs, et cetera, et cetera. So when you get a meltdown of the two minor parties, the Bloc Québécois and in particular the NDP, which is of course a national party, that support is going to traditionally gravitate towards the Liberals, and that's what we're seeing. And that makes it even tougher for a Conservative Party, regardless of the leader, to win. But as I was saying, Cory, I think that Poilievre is handling this business about the potential for Western secession properly. He has got to be opposed to discussion about that during the campaign, no matter what his internal beliefs are. Because, of course, if he was to even mention any thought that, well, maybe Manning knows what he's talking about, he would be immediately attacked for trying to blackmail voters. And, that would be a terrible strategy to be branded with. And so he's doing whatever he can to try and get the message back on the issues that he feels are important, which is affordability and housing issues and inflation and the cost of groceries and immigration levels and those all important national issues that to some extent are being overlooked because of this focus on Trump and tariffs, which by anybody's estimation will be a relatively short-lived, thank God, anomaly. At worst, I mean, it's going to be some ongoing negotiation and issues over the next few years. But what voters are deciding between the Liberals and the Conservatives for this election is going to dramatically affect not only ourselves, but more importantly, the future in the sense of our children and grandchildren. And that's what Preston is trying to make people realize. That yes, be concerned about tariffs and the impact that'll have on our economy and the economy of the United States, but don't make that all consuming and decide how you're going to cast your ballot, overlooking 9.5 years of destruction by Justin Trudeau, and I might add, by all the people that supported him throughout that time, most of which are still in the cabinet and the caucus and are running as candidates for Mark Carney. And, so what's going to change other than Mark Carney? And I would argue that if you do any research about this man, he's going to be worse than Justin Trudeau. So think carefully before you elect someone like that to direct Canada into the future.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the usual social media gotcha games, and they're trying to create a scandal or make something. We've seen hiccups. Some candidates have been dismissed over past statements. It seems to be kind of par for the course nowadays in elections, but there hasn't been any disasters on the Conservative campaign. I mean, it's been pretty solid, steady, but he also just hasn't landed any knockout punches either, though. He's kind of struggling to grab oxygen in the news scroll. I mean, we know that we've got a biased legacy media, which is a large part of his problem too. I mean, we saw on the CBC the other day, they cut off Carney mid-sentence to move away on to, Poilievre, I should say, mid-sentence to move on to something else. They would never dare to do that with a Liberal speaking up. But some people are putting faith in the debate. Dave mentioned that, a commenter mentioned that. That might be the opportunity where Poilievre can get out to Canadians, hopefully, and endear himself to them.
Well, I agree. And I think that to the extent possible, Pierre is trying his best to offer hope Canadians at a time when, not only because of Trump, but because of the legacy of 9.5 years of Trudeau, at a time when Canadians are struggling, really difficult times, being the cost of living, raising children, the worry about crime in our streets, and on and on and on. And he's trying his best to offer hope. And I think that hopefully, to coin a word, hopefully that will come through in the debate. Of course, the other problem that I want to raise here on the show is that while we all put some hope into how that might unfold on debate night, in particular the French debate, because of Carney's lack of command of the French language, but in both debates, it'll partly depend on the how they structure the debate itself. Will there be a real opportunity for Carney and Poilievre to go head to head in debate, similar to what they would have on the floor of the House of Commons during question period? That's what people are looking for. Even people that support Carney want to see how he would stand up to that level of debate, because Lord knows whether he's on the leader of the official opposition or, God forbid, the prime minister, he's going to have to go through that type of trial by fire in the House of Commons. So let's see how he does. But of course, the people that control the debate control how it's going to unfold. And so I'm not, assured by any stretch that there will be an opportunity for Pierre to really go eyeball to eyeball and toe to toe with Mark Carney.
Well, that's an interesting point, because the American system is a two-party system, so the debates are going to be one-on-one and they can have it out. Up here, you can really, and we saw that in the last debate, have a distraction when you've got Jagmeet Singh, who's irrelevant, in there, and you've got Elizabeth May, who's insane, in there, and they distract from any straight-out discourse, and often they spend more time where everybody just kind of turns their guns on the Conservative candidate rather than one-on-one, and I could see that sort of thing building up now, even if it's not purposeful. I mean, those parties have seats in the House. They should be there at the debate, but it makes it difficult to see a one-on-one between the two people who really are contending to be prime minister.
Exactly. And that's always been a problem. At least I would say that always been a problem with our debate system. Fine to have those types of debates, but there should be an opportunity to have a good, fulsome debate between the two individuals that are running to be the prime minister of the country. And it's a failing of our system that doesn't happen, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for, okay, we've got this, issue with the United States currently with Trump. We've got an issue where a large segment of the Western population is uncertain about what they will do if the Liberals win, I would argue. And they want to see those two individuals put forward their plan for Canada. And right now, the legacy media, as you mentioned, is protecting. They're trying their best, I would argue, to make Carney the current Teflon man, where nothing sticks to him. And so he's had his missteps, unlike Pierre. But do the media keep bringing it up like they would if it was a Conservative, like it would and they did with Stephen Harper? Of course not. As you say, they just avoid those types of discussions by and large. We get the odd one. And so let's hope that there is an opportunity during the debate for Pierre to land some blows, and that it makes people hesitate and say, okay, wait a minute, I really need to think about where I'm going to mark my X before I go behind the cardboard.
Absolutely. Well, Canadians got a lot of thinking to do. Let's hope that everybody's paying attention over this next couple of weeks and just, thinks carefully before they make their X. I know that can sound patronizing when you've got a leaning, but, just seriously, look at the issues, look carefully, and just think what's best for you. We've got our preferences, but I suspect if people look carefully, they'll probably feel a little more inclined to vote Conservative than perhaps they used to be, but we'll see. So
I sure hope so, Cory, because I think, as many people, always say, it seems like during an election campaign, this is the most important election in our history. But in this particular instance, I believe, as Preston is trying to show with his guest column, that it is very important. And in fact, it might, impact the future of the nation itself.
It most definitely will. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Jay. It's always great to have you on. Hope we can see you soon when you do come back to the Great White North there and have another conversation. And I'll let you get back to that sunny weather and making the Canadian case down there south of the border for us.
Okay, thanks, Cory.
All right, thanks. Yeah, we're moving quick today, guys. We've got a lot of guests. It's always great to get Jay on. He adds a good perspective, and he's, I don't like to talk about his age too much, but he's got a whole lot of experience and a whole lot of time enduring the House of Commons that he can share with us as a former Conservative government House leader. So it's fantastic when we can get him on. All right, let's go provincial now and talk to our man in Edmonton, James Snell. He's been writing some great stories and covering things from the Alberta perspective. How you doing, James?
I'm well, Cory. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's about time we got you on the show. I've been wanting to for quite a while. I've been enjoying your stories from up there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Maybe to begin with, I guess, kind of your first part of getting into covering the election and so on, kind of shows some of the difficulties the media is having when it's coming, independent media in particular, when it's coming to get access to liberal candidates, liberal events, or even just getting decent liberal answers. Mr. Carney didn't appreciate your input a little while ago.
Nor did thousands of left-wing Canadians who filled my inbox with hateful messages, Cory. But certainly, I was removed by Mark Carney's handlers when he launched his campaign for Liberal leader here in Edmonton. So, kicked out by the cops. But after that, I attended an announcement that he gave in Edmonton several weeks after, and I was permitted to ask a question. And I believe I asked a fair question of him that was regarding the expenditure of taking a government wide-body jet to Europe with his wife when he had not received a mandate in an election from taxpayers. So he didn't like that. I think it was an important question to ask, but, in all fairness to him, he did let me ask a question that time around.
Well, and that's good. I guess it's unfortunate. I mean, to be fair, I watched the other exchange too. You gave him a little bit of a loaded question to start with, but welcome to election time. You're going to get some tough ones. But it's interesting you bring that up, and I know. I mean, anybody who's been in independent media or general media, the keyboard warriors that can go bananas out there, and you really got to have a thick skin to do this now. And it's, we know that most of the threats and so on are not serious. It's just some basement-dwelling neckbeard out there somewhere. But all the same, I mean, it can get tiring, and it is really an undemocratic effort to try and shut down alternative voices. It's not a good thing.
Cory, and I agree. However, the Western Standard is really not an alternative voice anymore. Our viewership and readership is through the roof, beyond many other media outlets. So I think we're doing a good job, and I think we're doing an honest job, and often writing stories and asking questions that other media outlets would not.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's important. I mean, there's realities. Different outlets have a bit of a different inclination, though we try to keep our news copy absolutely as clean as possible. And that's why it's so important to have press access to as many outlets as possible to get in on these kinds of events, just to kind of bring in questions from different perspectives. It's good to hear that, they came in and gave you another question in a future event. Have you got more scheduled ahead of you?
Not so far. We're waiting for candidates to show up in Edmonton. So that'd be Pierre Poilievre, Mark Carney, perhaps he'll come here again, and Jagmeet Singh, who knows if he will show up.
Yeah, we'll see. So, I mean, among news going on up there, an interesting sort of story of a Liberal candidate kind of in and out. We had Rod Loyola leave the Alberta NDP caucus. For folks who aren't familiar with him, who are watching the show, he's been in the legislature for quite a while, though he's quite an extreme character. He always has been. He became the Liberal candidate to replace the Randys, and then he got kicked out as a candidate shortly after. What happened there?
So I believe that was Edmonton Gateway, not Edmonton Center.
Oh,
But,
okay. I thought it was
yeah, no problem. But yeah, it's a strange story, and very likely an extreme disappointment for him. He was a sitting MLA for the NDP here in the Alberta legislature. Then he pivoted over to become a candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada under leader Mark Carney, and was removed recently as a candidate. So we don't know who will replace him. So there's it seems like there's a revolving door of interesting characters that are sort of coming and going from candidacy right now.
Well, that leaves the NDP in an unusual spot. Would Nahendenchi, you think, say, well, go for it, Rod, you can run in your own by-election to replace yourself now that you've vacated that seat? Or, where do you go with that? Because the NDP kind of ends up with egg on their face out of that, too.
Yeah, Cory. So I have spoken with Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi regarding his affiliation with the federal NDP. And he told me that he differs in almost every single way from Jagmeet Singh. So that speaks volumes and begs the question, are traditional or habitual NDP voters in Alberta going to support the federal NDP, or will they pivot over to Mark Carney and the Liberals? So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, Nenchi's been kind of staying out of the federal race, which is probably good for his own sake. And I don't think anything's going to help Jagmeet Singh at this point in things. But we just got a lot of oddness going on up in Edmonton. And because if the polls are to be believed, though, there's a number of seats that might be in play up there, even though it's Alberta. Sohi, who is the mayor of Edmonton, now there's another interesting case. So he's taken a leave of absence. So he wanted to make sure he doesn't end up unemployed like Loyola did. But he's running for member of parliament.
That's correct, in Edmonton Southeast. And this is, by virtue of his position, a political heavy hitter. So that seat, it could very well go to the Liberals, Cory, but we'll see how that plays out. There's also Edmonton Centre, and that is former MP Randy Bossino's writing, or former cabinet minister, I should say. So I don't believe the Liberals have chosen a candidate there yet. So that's very much in play.
And then what about Heather McPherson? I mean, she's an NDP member of parliament in Edmonton, pretty far left among even the NDP caucus. Certainly took some stances on the Israel issue that annoyed me, to say the least. But
Sure.
Do you think she might fall victim to the NDP collapse in support?
That's difficult to say. Edmonton Strathcona is an NDP stronghold. So, I would say she stands, a fairly good chance of being reelected. But then we also have, like you say, we have to also consider, what's going on with federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. This is not a popular guy right now, certainly among conservatives, but potentially also among the political left in Canada.
Yeah, and I mean, you win or lose basically based on the central party leadership, whether you like it or not. I worked on a couple of campaigns before, one of which where I was managing a campaign for a Wildrose candidate. We were leading in the polls, and then the party sort of fell apart. And we lost to an NDP candidate who only showed up on weekends and didn't even live in the constituency. Whereas we ran a very solid campaign locally. But realistically, if your own party collapses, there's nothing much you can do about it. And McPherson might be at risk of that.
Right. And we should be looking at what's going to happen in Calgary and Edmonton. These cities have seen a massive influx of people from other provinces. Tens of thousands of people have really flooded into Calgary and Edmonton. And so the question is, how are they going to vote? And are they going to vote for Mark Carney? Are they going to vote NDP? I don't know.
And then further, I mean, you've got a couple of hats on with you being up there. You're watching the legislature. Things have been kind of overwhelmed, I guess, with everything that's going on south of the border and in Ottawa. But at the same time, we've got an embattled premier in Alberta who's really trying to get some policy through in the legislature. And she's burning the candle on three ends as well. What's going on up there right now?
Well, she's not embattled anymore, Cory. I can tell you that right now. She has been vilified and demonized for making multiple trips down to the States to visit Trump and others to advocate for Alberta. She's been ridiculed for it, called a traitor for it. But that's not true anymore, as we've seen that there is a very good chance that all of those efforts have actually paid off. And, we can't know for sure, though, but she's certainly not embattled anymore. And the NDP has been vociferous in their criticism of the premier. But I think many of those voices will be silent now, and they will possibly just pivot back to the Alberta Health Services controversy, which right now at this point, with everything going on in North America and around the world, is a bit of a dead duck. So I don't really know where the NDP is going to go in question period next week, because the premier is just not embattled anymore.
So speaking of that, kind of as we move to the end here and your provincial coverage, though, that's going to be the dominant story probably, is the Alberta Health Services mess that's going on there with procurement contracts. For people watching from outside of Alberta, there's been quite a blow up going on there. And what timeline is going on? Because that's going to go on until we've seen some of these inquiries and investigations wrap up, and that's going to be a while yet.
Well, if I were the premier and her staff, I would drag this entire thing out into the next mandate. That's what I would do. It's difficult to say what will happen just in terms of that conversation. There are other things going on in Alberta now, and we can't forget that Premier Smith has threatened, in a roundabout way, a potential national unity crisis if Alberta's needs are not met. So if Mark Carney continues, if he becomes prime minister, if he continues the policies of Justin Trudeau and Guilbeault, then there's going to be a brand new, or maybe I should call it a recycled conversation about Alberta sovereignty. And so depending on who becomes prime minister, that will affect the dominant conversations in provincial politics in Alberta.
So I guess, but before I let you go, you've got a heck of a lot to cover and do up there, and you've been doing great so far. Have you got any stories on the burner? What are you following in the federal election right now?
Well, yesterday was a very interesting day for sure, Cory, with respect to NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who was associating himself and appearing to have a great deal of fun with an OnlyFans porn creator in Vancouver. Is this a sin necessarily? Is having fun on a campaign bus a sin? No, it certainly isn't. They're having more fun certainly than Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. But we also need to think that, what if this was someone on Pierre Poilievre's bus? I can tell you it would make international headlines. There would be an uproar in Canada. There would be an uproar. It would spread all around the world. And so, what seems like, a sensational story or a sensationalized story, it actually isn't. We always try to make our reports and our writing engaging so that people will enjoy reading content that is real. But As I covered Singh and yesterday and his involvement with this young lady, I really did ask myself, like, what if this was a Pierre Poilievre campaign bus? Well, the proverbial poop would have hit the fan, I can tell you right now. And so that's why I wrote those stories.
Oh yeah, and we've got to look at everything anyways, and sometimes we need a little bit of the light, and as well to point out the parallels. I mean, likewise, to be fair, had it been Carney with the same issue, it would have been big news as well. I mean, the other reality is, Singh's just not a contender for prime minister, so then it's easy to kind of dismiss it as a sideshow at this point rather than take it too seriously. But it sure isn't an unusual story.
Yeah, absolutely, Cory. And, I've met Jagmeet Singh. He's a very nice individual, but being a nice individual is not going to save him necessarily in the upcoming election. That's for sure.
No, nice guys don't always finish first, and it's just I don't see how he can stop from anything beyond treading water. Well, thanks. I really appreciate you coming on, and to look forward to more of your coverage coming from out of Edmonton, and I appreciate what you've written so far. So thanks for joining us, and keep up the good fight there, James.
You're welcome, Cory. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and look forward to chatting again.
Great, thanks. So that is from our legislative bureau there, James Snell. And yeah, watch those stories. He's been prolific and doing a fantastic job up there in Edmonton. As I said, we're independent media. We're covering things. We're doing well. But we got to put a lot of hats on. So James is covering a federal and a provincial beat up there and doing a fantastic job while he's at it. So yeah, getting on this election, I was a commenter, James Mesher, mentioning, I believe, because we're talking what's going to move these polls, what's happening with these polls. A lot of people saying maybe it's going to be the debate, very possibly. And an element that's going to be different in the debate is, as James said, that the Bloc is going to be attacking Carney. And that's going to be another element that's going to be interesting to watch, because he's right. The difference before was everybody turned their guns on the Conservative, in past debates. And Blanchette, he's kind of speaking of kind of likable politicians in a way. I mean, he speaks for Quebec. He makes no bones about it. He doesn't care about the rest of the country. He's there for Quebec only, and that's what he does. You don't have to like it, but you can respect it. And they were doing all right before. But now the Bloc is kind of joining the NDP in this free fall in the polls. And if you look at polls in Quebec, the Conservatives, I mean, they're not terribly strong there, but they've been okay. But along a lot of the polls where the Conservatives have dropped a fair amount, in Quebec, actually, they've stayed kind of solid. But what's happened is the Bloc has plummeted along with the NDP, and again, the Liberals have become the beneficiaries of that. So I don't think Blanchette's going to waste time going after Poilievre in the debates. He needs to chip away at the Liberals. He needs to go after Carney. And during the French debate, he's definitely going to have an opportunity to do that. You know what he's going to do. He's going to speak quickly in French. He's going to use large words in French because he knows that Carney's French is weak. And when you're in a live debate, it's very difficult to keep up. So he's really going to hammer on him. Likewise, Poilievre. So during the French debate, I think Carney is really going to be put on in the pressure cooker there. Whereas he wasn't so much in the past ones, or the Liberal leader wasn't so much anyway. Yeah, Carney wasn't there before. So the French debate's going to be worth watching. I mean, they're both going to be worth watching. And for people concerned about the Conservatives' future and thinking that the debates might be where those undecideds or people are just going to make their minds up, well, these are going to be some very well-watched debates. So I'm going to go over a few of the polls. They're all over the darn map. And that's what makes it difficult to believe any of them. So the CBC, I'll start with that one because they've got an aggregator, and I know it's the state broadcaster. We don't have much faith in their leanings, and fair enough, especially when Carney has just offered them another $150 million, I believe, on top of their $1.5 billion bloody dollars. So it's hard to have faith in their goodwill, but they've got an aggregator for their polls on the CBC, and you can see the Liberals, what they feel is sitting now at 43.6%, Conservatives at 37.7%. And this is what they've put together from a number of polls. New Democrats at 8.2%, again irrelevant, just bottomed out. The Bloc 5.5%. Now that's got to be read differently, of course, because they're concentrated all in Quebec, but I do believe they were typically more like 8 or 9% because they would contest a lot more seats within Quebec, and they are really hurting in there now. The Greens, they're just the Greens. They're going to have their few little strongholds. They're sitting at 2%. People's Party, 2%, even worse than the Greens as far as that goes, because the bottom line is there is not a single seat in Canada where the People's Party is close to contesting to make a win. They might make an impact. There's going to be some strong candidates here and there. They might become a spoiler in a few. Things to keep in mind for Conservative candidates. But they're just not really a factor in this one. Aside from people who want to vote, I guess, on a principle that are frustrated with the Conservatives from the right-hand side of things. But that's what we're seeing on one end of the polls with the things. And as I said, there was another one with a pollster I'm not as familiar with. They're Innovative is the name of them. And they showed the Conservatives leading by a point. But again, I mean, look at the graph here. And this graph looks similar to just about every pollster, though, with, again, the Conservatives used to be leading, the Liberals used to be in the toilet. A sudden spike in Liberal support, along with, you can see that orange line down there, the decline of the NDP. See, the Conservatives haven't fallen so much as the NDP and the Bloc have just collapsed, and it's gone to the Liberals. A person who would have voted for Democratic Socialists, as ironic as that term is, they're not going to turn around and join the Conservatives. That's just not the way they go. So if they're going to make a strategic vote, if they're going to do a pragmatic vote, they're going to go Liberal. So this one, again, is showing them in a horse race, neck and neck. So, I mean, we're talking a 10-point difference between two different polls. I'm going to pull up Nanos just to get a third example going on in here. They're similar to the aggregate that the CBC brought in. They're showing, again, the Liberals sitting at 44, 45% support, and the Conservatives about 37. It's not looking good, guys, for the Conservatives. They got some very serious ground to make up, because you got to chew through polls on vote efficiency as well. Some have more and some have less. That's why I'm saying, too, we don't have a proportional representation. The People's Party might pull 2% of support. They're not going to get 2% of the seats. They're not going to get any seats. And unfortunately, the Liberals typically are actually more efficient. If it was tied neck and neck in a race all across the country, the Liberals would probably win the election, with a minority at least, because they just tend to win more seats based on that amount of vote and where it's concentrated. So some ground has to be cleared. But again, if you can have different pollsters showing such a wide spread, as I said, Abacus I don't have an image for, but they've been somewhat favorable to the Conservatives. They're showing a Liberal lead now, though narrow, but they're still 5-6 points different than the others. So these things, Marie Perrin saying, I don't believe the polls, they're biased. Well, yeah, they're the best we've got, but we can't read too much into them. They're moving too much. One thing, when you see all of the polls, no matter who they are, showing such a spike like that too, though, what it does show is the electorate is volatile right now. They are grumpy. They're changing their mind quickly. They're being reactive. And that means that the poll can change pretty quickly in the other direction, depending on events as well. So you can only, again, as people say, they're a snapshot of the moment. Often that's a slow trend. Right now we're seeing spikes. So a whole lot could happen and a whole lot can change in very short order. We're one issue or one scandal away from that line changing or going more strongly up, depending on what happens. I mean, we haven't seen a serious scandal. We've seen people trying to make one, all over the place, screaming about the efforts of individual candidates. Some candidates are kicked out for this, kicked out for that. Nothing that's really moving the needle. This latest story, Dave mentioned too, with Mark Carney's father, was a principal, I guess, at a residential day school, made some pretty controversial statements a long time ago to the CBC. This is one of the areas where I'm not big on this. It's his father. I understand people say, okay, Carney's father would have had an impact on Carney, and Carney's behavior and values would be reflected in that later. Yeah, I guess a bit. And likewise, when people went after Carney's daughter and brought her up, I just don't like bringing the family members of the politicians into it. I really don't. I don't think in this case it's terribly directly relevant. I can see why it's being reported on. Whatever. I want to focus more on the politicians themselves. It's just a more principled way to go, and I think it's a more accurate way to go. I understand you can read in on how those things have impacts. I just don't necessarily think it's where we should be focusing. Either way, it's an item of interest, and people are certainly reading up on it, and whether or not it impacts the fortunes of Carney or not. I doubt it will with too much, but boy, it sure shows. It shows the language of the past too, though, and a little bit of tit for tat, which is fair enough, with the woke who go bananas and so on over some comments or historical figures for things they said 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. So Carney's father had said some things about, Negroes and using terms that we just don't use any longer. But it was during a CBC interview of all things back then, because at that time it was just the accepted terms. But we can't hold people to the same, expectations and values today by what they said back then. We've got to stop doing that. And that's been a trick of the left to pull that stunt and beat on historic figures and other people. I don't think two wrongs make a right. Not, I don't know if Carney's dad was an odious racist character or if he was just a man speaking of older times. But I'm more concerned about what's going on right now and what the current politicians are saying. Wilder was asking a question, what's my prediction for the federal election? Yeah, I put that out on X. And again, I mean, those are throwing the dart at the board. I'm still going to stand by where I was a week ago. I think it's going to be a liberal minority. I won't mind if I'm wrong. And I tell you what, when I'm making a prediction halfway through an election, I'm throwing a dart at a board. I'm not basing that on solid information. That's just a gut feeling, which, wouldn't be the first time I've been wrong in predicting an election. So that's where I'm sitting right now. But that can most definitely change. Something else that worries me a bit on this. As I said, if we're looking at the demographics, again, polls, we know they lean, they do things. And I mentioned this last week, is the past Liberal support used to be more among the younger people. Trudeau, when he first got in 2015, his base was younger people. They wanted a fresh face. They wanted somebody in. And seniors and so on tended to support Conservative. Well, right now we're still seeing the same thing. It's the boomers who are supporting the Liberals right now. It's the older people supporting the Liberals and the younger people still supporting Conservatives. Well, that's nice. The problem is when I'm talking about effective votes and concentrating votes and getting into places, older voters are far more inclined to get out to vote. That's part of why in the past Conservatives were often underrepresented in polls, because the polls would show the Conservatives behind by a few points, and then when the election happens, the Conservatives get a few more points higher than what was polled. Well, that's because, yeah, it's one thing for a person to answer a phone and say they're going to do one thing or another, and it's another for those who actually get off their butts and go out and vote. And young people aren't that great for getting off their butts to go out and vote. They're more easily distracted. So they don't tend to be a more efficient voter for you. They're an important voter. Of course they are. But that's how polls get affected. But so that's where I worry that the Conservatives aren't being as underrepresented in these polls as people hope they are, because the demographic isn't sitting in their favor for that now. But we'll see. Dan Hadfield saying, just to be contrarian, you say there's no such thing as a democratic socialist. Giving what I hear, there aren't many democratic conservatives. Well, yeah, I mean, respect for democracy is something that can be a fleeting thing, and a lot of people who want to shut things down left, right, they don't like critique. I still like to think the Conservatives right now are valuing democracy more than the Liberals. There's nothing worse than the entitlement of being in power too long. And that's something I talked about on Wednesday on my show, and I got a column coming out to speak of it. We need to turn over governments now and then. We need to. If the Conservatives have been in for 10 years, I doubt I'd vote Liberal. I never have, but I can understand where people will be, okay, they've had enough of them. It's time to turn them over and get some fresh faces. And you have to, because that's when you start getting, every party gets it. The buddy contracts are going on, the inside trading, some of the corruption, or just some of the cynicism. A lot of members are just mailing it in for a pension by that point, and it doesn't matter which party. You've got to kick them out and flush them out now and then. It's healthy for democracy. And those ones who are entrenched, who are in there, again, whether it's left or right, they tend not to want to leave. So they're going to do whatever they can and use whatever is at their disposal to keep themselves in those positions. So we get a little anti-democratic with some of that stuff too. And the bigger worry, though, as I said, with Albertans getting upset and frustrated, we put up with the Liberals because everybody's kind of under the understanding, okay, 9, 10, 11 years maybe, but they're going to get flushed out and we'll get a break from them. And, we'll see that turnover. But right now, we're saying, 10 years of some of the worst government we've ever seen, and then holy cow, you guys are looking to give them a whole fresh start and possibly another 4 to 10 years with Carney. So that's what Jay Hill was talking about. That's what Preston Manning was talking about. There is a lot on the line with this election. because that agreement will have been broken. If we aren't flushing the pipes after 9 years of a government that bad, how can anybody hold any hope for positive change coming in the longer term? What does it take, right? That's the question people are asking. What does it take? All right, let's talk to Peter Coleman of the National Citizens Coalition. That'll be the first time we've had Peter on. And again, kind of like Franco, these are people very busy right now with a whole lot to cover. So thank you for joining us today, Peter.
Thanks, Cory. How are you today?
Pretty good, actually. I talk about the negative and I rant and I rave and I go on. But, for politicos, this is like our Super Bowl, right? This is the time to really pay attention to things and hoping for the best.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. I think, I listened to your preamble coming into this, and I think you're right in a bunch of things. What I do find interesting, though, Cory, is the rallies that Poilievre's had in Ontario in the last week. 5,000 or so in Hamilton, in a union town, 6,500 last night in Oshawa. And I really think this time, Cory, the younger generation is going to vote. That's part of our strong campaign at the NCC. And to get the boomers to change their mind and realize that 10 years more of the Liberals we can't afford. But there's a lot of young people in Ontario that should give your Western listeners hope, that are incredibly motivated to vote, that would have voted for Trudeau in 2015 because they wanted pot legalized, as an example. And they're increasingly tired because pocketbook issues matter to them and they don't see a future.
Yeah, well, and if the youth can be galvanized, they can be very effective. Going farther back, and Ed Nenshi won Calgary as I believe at the start of the mayoral campaign at like 4 or 5%, and he ended up pulling a win out of it. We're going back about 14 years or so, but Sure. It was mostly based on a very galvanized and well-organized vote of young people getting out and getting to the polls. So I was speaking in broad terms of how people vote, but right. You're absolutely right. If they can get out, they can make a big impact.
Yeah, I think that's the case too. And I think what you're going to see now too is like everybody expected. I'm actually surprised that the Liberals got a bigger bump as they did, but the Conservatives have been sort of 35 to 38 to 40% pre-Carney. But it's also the case now that, as you said earlier, Cory, the NDP votes collapsed, which is an irony because if Singh had the guts to call an election, the Liberals would have got wiped out. Now it's the NDP that are getting hurt badly. So there's a lot of things moving around and still a lot of time left.
Yeah, well, and as I was saying with the polls, when they can go up that fast, it means they can come down that fast too. We've got a very, very unpredictable electorate right now. But part of the thing that's frustrating is we've got that big factor south of the border that's beyond everybody's control, which is Donald Trump, and he really is driving the issues. Do you think maybe though? We saw his big announcement on Tuesday. While there's still a lot of challenges, a lot of negotiations, a lot of things that are going to happen, he didn't add any more on Canada. Like he didn't inflame it any further, at least. Do you think he might stop being as much of a factor?
Well, Cory, when you predict what Donald Trump can do for all of us, you let me know, okay?
I'm not trying to predict him. I'm just trying to predict, how much of a factor he would be in the next few weeks of the campaign. I guess.
I think it's the elephant in the room, and I think it's an unknown. But what I find incredibly frustrating is why do people think Carney's the best person to deal with Trump? He's a globalist, he's elitist, he's a net zero guy, he's so tied up in Brookfield. It's just there's so many things that you would think that Trump would not like about Carney. And I don't like the fact that Carney's talking about what he's going to do about the states. No one made you prime minister other than your party. He shouldn't be talking about the deals and the fact that the long-term relationship with the states is ruined. Yes, it's very damaged, but I think there's time to save it. And who says Carney's the best to deal with Trump? I don't buy it.
No, absolutely. I've been kind of wondering that myself, and my theory on it's just been, again, maybe just when people, it was such a full-bore sort of assault on our economy from Trump that people are more inclined to just go to what they feel is stability, and that's the party that happens to be in power. I think if the Conservatives had happened to have been in power at that point, they'd be riding that same wave because they're like, well, I'm getting behind our prime minister, and I'm going to support him in the face of that threat, and the Liberals would be suffering. It's just a fluke of timing, sort of.
I think it is too, but more people should watch you on Western Stand than CBC, Cory.
Hey, I keep trying to tell them that. We're working on it.
Yeah, I know, and you continue to do well with it because I just don't see why that Carney's the best person to deal with Trump, and it is the wild card, and I'm glad to see Poilievre pivot a bit to be a little tougher in this conversation, but at the end of the day, you still got to have a relationship with the states, no matter who wins coming forward. And for Carney to be saying, well, we're just going to pivot, start selling all our product to Asia and Europe, it's not that simple. It's not that easy. It's going to take a long time. So you've got to keep some relationship with the states. And I think Danielle Smith's done a very good job in being that kind of person for Canada and doing that.
Yeah, and Polyev got put in a difficult position. I mean, there's a segment to the conservative base that's very sympathetic and supportive of Donald Trump. It's a weird sort of overlap of supporters within Canada, and they're very fanatically so. And I mean, speaking for myself as a more classical liberal, libertarian conservative, I was critical of Trump, for example, on social media, and they went bananas on me. I lost 1,000 followers on X and so on. Whatever, it's not a big deal to me. But if you're a person running for prime minister, you don't want to inflame a group of your supporters if you can avoid it, even if it's 10% of your support or not. So he had a tougher time taking a tough stance with Trump because it could actually still hurt him a little bit when it really counts.
Yeah, I think that's true, Cory. But I also think there's a level you've got to make sure you're going to put forward what you're going to do when you become prime minister. And I think Poilievre's done a very good job in his campaign of laying things out, and he's increasingly sort of narrowed his focus on what's going to happen with the relationship with Trump. And I think that issue is going to matter. It's going to be a big issue, but we have other bigger things to deal with in the country as well. And I don't think you've seen a single thing from the Liberals right now that they're any different now with Carney than they were in the last 10 years.
No, Carney's not going to change anything. He's surrounded by that same group of clowns that Justin Trudeau was. Unfortunately, he's smarter than Justin in a way. That makes it more disturbing because he's just as ideological. He's still as hung up on net zero and some of those policies, emissions caps and C-69, which are going to harm the Canadian economy. But it just doesn't seem to matter to people. So getting back to the National Citizens Coalition, though, I mean, there's an organization with a nice, rich history of, keeping citizens informed and working on things. It's where Stephen Harper resided as a time in the role heading that organization. What campaign have you guys got going on? How are you working throughout this election?
Well, we're trying in this. We got a partnership with Western Standing, which we're very thankful for the next little bit. We're trying to get the message out to people that we need change and we need real change coming forward. We're trying to go after the younger generation, which is under the 40 group, which you see in the polls, Cory, being higher than the Liberals, and try and get the boomers that are sort of wavering, liberal or not, to sort of say, you can't afford 10 more years of this nonsense. And to be honest, I'd rather people vote for the NDP than vote for the Liberal. We'd like that NDP vote to rise up as well. And I think there's still a lot to be going on before it's over, Cory. I think you said earlier those debates are going to matter. We're trying to focus on that. We're trying to stay positive with what they think that the issues are that matter more to Canadians. And it's a lot more than just Trump. And yes, he's the elephant in the room in too many ways, but we're trying to educate people across the spectrum that we can't afford what we have dealt with the last 10 years. The country deserves better, deserves pipelines, deserves security, deserves financial integrity. None of the things that the Liberals have done. And the most hypocrisy you could ever see, Cory, is this carbon tax being canceled. The sky was falling. The world's going to end if we don't keep the carbon tax. Canada's 1.6% of the world's greenhouse gases. All of a sudden, they're going to get their butt handed to an election, so they cancel it. And they're trying to take credit for it? Like, it's just astounding.
Oh, yeah, the rhetoric in the past was so torqued. I mean, you were called an earth destroyer, global boiling. If you did not support that carbon tax, you were supporting the burning of our children. It was insane. And then suddenly, okay, I guess we don't need it.
Yeah, but we've been supporting pipelines. If we want to solve our 1.6%, Cory, you know as well as I do, we need to ship liquefied natural gas to India and China and to Europe, and that's the way we're going to solve it, because we're not going to get to zero. We're a cold country. We're always going to have a level of that, and for the Liberals to be focusing on that solely, and all of a sudden that doesn't matter anymore, like it's as Brian Mulroney would say, there's no hooer like an old hooer, and it's just we're seeing that now with the Liberals now and how they're behaving with the carbon tax.
Well, it's funny, and Mulroney got away with saying that back then. Could you imagine if a conservative leader used that term now? I mean, all you have to say is biological clock ticking, and you lose 2 days of the news cycle. Just to get to that point, Poilievre's got a very hostile legacy media. There's no doubt about that. They've been torqued. They've been on his case. They've been selective with what they cover. They're giving nothing but puffers to Carney's group out there. But that amplifies the importance of third-party and independent groups at least getting messaging out there during campaigns too, like the Taxpayers Federation and you guys with the Citizens Coalition.
Right. And I think you're seeing, I think Cory bit the blooms off the rose, because you could hate Trudeau for all you wanted to, and there's lots of reason to do. He was good in the campaign trail. Carney's, like, the criticism of Poilievre in the day, I think he's loosened up a bunch, was he was boring and stiff. Well, if Poilievre's boring and stiff, I don't know what Carney is, because he's like a wet rag on the campaign trail. He comes across as an elitist, and we're trying to tell people there is hope, there's still an opportunity, and we have to keep fighting, because I don't believe the polls are as bad as they are, and I think they're going to tighten even more, and the debate's going to matter. So we're trying to present the common sense responsibility things, like we've talked about fiscal, the military needs to be built back up, and all the things that we should have been doing as a country before, reviewing our foreign aid to make sure it's appropriate. All those things, there's billions of dollars that can be put towards our military, developing the Arctic, developing pipelines, and that's the message we're going to stay on, a very positive message. And I think the media is going to become tougher on Carney, maybe not as tough on Poilievre, and you're right there, but I think Poilievre's handling the media brilliantly so far, to be honest.
Yeah, well, and I was talking about that kind of earlier in the show, that, I haven't seen any missteps on the part of the Conservative campaign. You see the little blips, the hiccups, but there's been no
Sure.
catastrophe or anything. He's just having trouble getting traction. And part of it too, I think, though, as you said, Carney is dull as dishwater, but people were ready for change. And Carney, as far as personality, reflects the opposite of Trudeau. Trudeau was the tongue hanging out clown. He was the shallow man. He was the showing off his socks and other things. I think people felt a little more, they could gravitate towards that dry, straight-faced man who was standing up there. Again, it doesn't mean it's a better candidate, but just instinctively, and instinct is how a lot of people vote sometimes. That's kind of what Carney brought to them, a mature figure after 9 years of something of a clown.
I think that's true, but his policies are going to matter too. I mean, the fact that Orange Man is bad, it won't be enough, I don't think, for Carney to win. He's going to try and run that pony to the end, but the policies that matter. And I've heard nothing from Carney. I mean, I'm not sure you have, Cory, that shows you different than the policies of Trudeau. And I think at the end of the day, people are going to say, if more people say we deserve a change because we're not better off, then I think Poilievre wins. And if it's stuck on Trump, then I think that the Liberals will win. But I think we can move that off Trump a little bit.
Well, I hope some people will also realize that I don't think it's really going to matter that much which of those two faces off with Trump, because as you said, Trump's going to do whatever the heck Trump is going to do. He's got his own vision, whatever that might be, good, bad, or indifferent. And he's going to push forward with it no matter who the Canadian Prime Minister is. So kind of remove that aspect from what you're looking at in a leader. And you're seeing a lot more pluses with Poilievre, who's put forward policy ideas, versus, as you said, Carney, who's just trying to keep weak on policy and say Orange Man bad.
He doesn't really want to flush out anything, does he, Cory? It just seems like it's just more of the same. I mean, I wish there were some visionary policies, some Carney, but they don't have them. As you said earlier, it's the same cabinet, it's the same clowns that are there that have done a terrible job before, and they want to run it back. And I think we have to keep the focus on the policy, because you're 1,000% right. We've already got a free trade deal with the Americans, and that if that doesn't matter now, it doesn't really matter who's going to be trying to deal with Trump, because it's like trying to grab Jello some days.
Yeah, or that was a term I heard somebody else in a radio interview. It's like trying to nail Jello to a wall. Yeah, it's just difficult. So, I mean, again, set that, people should try and set that aside. And I mean, the thing that worries me with Carney, people are saying, oh, he's a pragmatist. That's why, basically he's just grabbed the entire Conservative policy book because it looked practical all of a sudden. But he's an ideologue, and people can't forget that. They got to look at what Carney was writing years ago, what he was promoting years ago. Ideologues don't change their stripes that easily. He is still fixated on net zero. He's still fixated on carbon taxes as the means to get there. I don't know why people are suddenly trusting him. He would not be the first politician to get in with a majority and just basically go back on every part of his word once he gets in there.
And that's part of our messaging. If your supporters want to go to nationalcitizens.ca, our website, Cory, they can see a lot of the ads and the videos we put out. And that's laying out exactly what you're talking about, what Carney's done and what he's most likely to do. And part of our role is to educate people and try and get through that fog of the CBC, where there's a voice out there saying, well, wait a second, CBC doesn't have all the right answers. In fact, they got very few. And we're trying to get that message out to people that will look past that filter of CBC and say, okay, let's look at the facts and the realities. And I don't think Carney lines up very well when people do that.
No, well, and let's hope. I mean, a campaign is kind of a long time. It goes fast and it drags
Right.
out at the same time. People often don't really give it a close scrutiny until the tail end. The debates, again, tend to be that real tipping point for true swing voters. I mean, there's a lot of people that they're just not going to move one way or another, no matter who's in there. But the swing voters, the ones who truly are in the mushy middle, they often see the debate as the time when they're going to kind of wake up, turn off the sitcoms, and pay a bit of attention before they make up their mind to vote. So it's going to be a very critical event, I think.
Cory, if we were able to move the conservative vote up 4 and the liberal down 4, we'd be having a different conversation. I think that's the challenge right now. Will the debates galvanize people? And I think people think that Carney's the smartest guy in the room. But what happens if Poilievre just does a fantastic job and comes across as personable? And it's like, I know Stephen Harper really well because I work with him. He was a very personable guy when he wanted to be and got out there in front of people. And in a debate, people would say, actually, I can vote for Harper. I got no problem with him. The media's telling me he's really boring and dour and has no personality. He's got lots of that. And I think that the same thing with Poilievre. If Poilievre comes across as calm, relaxed, very knowledgeable, and can go toe-to-toe with Carney on the so-called academic part of the conversation, that people might say, well, maybe Carney isn't the smartest guy in the room.
Well, and there's the likability factor too, which is just tough. It's just the nature of people and the role they're in at the time. Like I've always liked Stephen Harper, but when he was prime minister, he would come across as a bit cold, introverted, careful. And I saw him, I don't know, a few months back at a Fraser Institute event, and he was so much more relaxed. It's so much easier to be a former prime minister than an aspiring or a current prime minister. And he was much more candid and relaxed, and that makes him much more likable. It's a little different when you're on the front lines, and that's where Poilievre is right now. So it's a little harder for him to loosen the tie and, reach people that way. But, he's not necessarily as uptight as people might think.
No, and I think having Poilievre's wife's a rock star. I think having her in the campaign trail, she's a very bright lady, and I think their relationship is one that we should all admire. And both their backgrounds, and I think that's her in the campaign trail softened him up. You see him smiling a bit more. He seems to be really enjoying these rallies, and if he can take that attitude, Cory, into these debates and come across as that personable guy in difficult times with the right ideas, then I think that those debates could really make a difference.
Well, especially when, there's sort of two factors that'll happen when they've got policies that both look very similar, again, because the Liberals basically just kind of plagiarized the Conservative playbook. But then it comes down to personality and trust. Do you like the other one more than the other, and do you trust the other one more than the other? And I'm surprised so many people are trusting Carney at this point, but that can change.
Well, we hope, and it's as you said, it's hard to get through that filter for Poilievre. But in the campaign, the media, I think in the past little bit, Cory started to cover more Poilievre sound bites. At first, it was all Carney all the time, and I think that's getting a little fair because in the campaign they have to cover both sides a bit. And Poilievre or a conservative will never get that fair ground. You know that as well as I do. But I think his ideas resonate more with people than Carney's, and I think that there's still lots of time left. I'm optimistic still.
Oh, absolutely. It's just halfway and things do change. All right. Well, before I let you go, where can people again find your work and follow what you guys are doing and support it if they may?
Yeah, our website is nationalcitizens.ca, and you can find all our videos and ads and campaigns and really what we're all about. And my email's on there if people want to talk to me directly. And I appreciate your time.
Great. Well, thank you again. I see we got the wrong label underneath you there as Jay Hill, but it is Peter Coleman of the National Citizens Coalition. And yes, it's an organization that's been around for a long time, and it's important. I mean, outside organizations getting beyond media and getting others just to get that information. The information's so essential. So thanks for coming on to talk to us today, and hopefully maybe we could talk again before the end of the campaign and see where things are rolling.
That'd be great, Cory. Thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So one more time, Peter Coleman of the National Citizens Coalition. Check them out. And they've been there a long time, as J.R. Michael's saying. Yeah, an effective organization. And they put out good info. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. It's a battle for information. And even if stuff seems dry, it's important, and they package it up well. National Citizens Coalition, the Taxpayers Federation. You want to get more into the studies in depth too. You know, there's groups like Fraser Institute and others that put out such important stuff because we're not getting it from the legacy media. You know, something else interesting out of the whole thing. I was watching Rosie Barton and her interaction with Carney early in the thing. And again, that visceral response, you know, when I had James Snell talking earlier too, on the feedback he got, how much the swarms came after him when he questioned Carney at a media event. And then it was even more blasphemy, though. I mean, it's one thing for a Western Standard reporter to question Carney, but for a CBC reporter to dare question Carney, that's disturbing. Actually, that's very disturbing. And there were petitions, there were moves to have Rosemary Barton fired from the CBC because she once dared to hold a Liberal candidate's feet to the fire. It shows the entitlement. It shows how the hardcore Liberal supporters just feel that their people are above question. And not only that the CBC should know its place and not dare to hold Liberals to account. It also shows when Carney turned around and gave another $150 million, or he's offering another $150 million to the Liberals. He's buying love. That's the danger we have right now. You know, and again, let's pat ourselves on the back or do a little bit of self-serving. That's why it's important to support independent media like us. We don't take the tax dollars. So we'll hold governments to account no matter who they are. That's part of the deal that's going on. The legacy media is afraid that Poilievre is going to cut the subsidies. Poilievre's already said he's going to cut the CBC. So they have a self-interest in keeping Poilievre out, and that's a dangerous place for the media to be in. And I tell you what, at least speaking for myself, if Poilievre wins, becomes the prime minister, we still don't take tax dollars. And you know what? If Poilievre screws up as prime minister down the road, I'm going to be all over him like a fat kid on a Smartie, just as much as I am on the case of the Liberals when they screw up. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to my paycheck because we aren't subsidized. That's why independent media is so important. And I mean independent on the left and right. There shouldn't be any subsidies going to any media. Should just leave it there. You know, look how bad it's gotten. We've laughed about it. It was a joke, but you know, where they took somebody as insane as Rachel Gilmore and made her a fact checker for one episode, anyways, with CTV. Well, who even thought that was appropriate? This was a hyper partisan individual they put into a fact checker position. It was ridiculous. And this is where the media is sitting, though. So again, the importance of independent media, and as I said, and these groups to get that information through to people. There's some of the interesting thing that's happening, though. We've got the media monopoly is gone. It's not like it was 30 years ago, where the only place you could really get news was your television or a newspaper or the radio. Those were your sources. You know, the internet was barely getting out of the gates still. So the thing that made that balanced, at least, though, was there were dozens and dozens of newspapers. They were that thick. There were all those channels with reporters all over the place covering things, and there was some balance. I think there was a lot that always leaned left, but all the same, there was some balance. There was some that leaned right, too. Newspapers were huge. They had revenue. They could afford columnists of all different political stripes to cover all those issues. They don't have that anymore. So just some of the other talk on things before I go, you know. Again, talking about factors that impact the race that are beyond the control of the leaders. So the job numbers in Canada are terrible. They just came out. It showed massive job losses. Now, the irony is, those things move more slowly typically. The reason for that plummet, a lot of the reason for that plummet, is a decade of crappy Liberal management. But the Liberals are going to blame that on Trump. And they'll get away with it. You know, and they can use him as a bogeyman to blame for every one of their bad policies. And we're in for an economic kick in the knackers right now. And some of that is the fault of Trump. Actually, a good part of it. Look at the markets. They have crashed. They have plummeted. They have been slammed. Because, yes, one of the biggest economies in the world has decided to go to economic war with the entire world. And it's hurting everybody. But it shouldn't impact our votes here, guys. We got the same candidates saying they'll try to deal with things locally as well as they can. Because neither of them are going to have, I think, any more or less impact on Trump than the other. So then look beyond that part. Because we want to see what the Canadian policies are going to be. One of the bigger ones then, fine, like Trump, don't like Trump. What he did was expose how vulnerable we are with having only one customer for a lot of our products. And everybody kind of got it clear. Even in Quebec, the majority, even if the bloc members and so on aren't supporting it, support getting pipelines to the East Coast and West so we can send energy products overseas to different customer bases. Everybody kind of agrees, wow, that's a good idea. You know what? Because we just don't know how steady our customer south anymore is anymore. Let's diversify our customer base. The problem is only Poilievre, I think, will have the balls to actually get it done. Carney's already been caught in doublespeak. He said, I'm going to get it to the coast. Oh, but I'm not getting rid of Bill C-69. For people not familiar with C-69, that's the anti-pipeline bill. If he's not getting rid of that bill, there's never going to be a pipe. So Carney's lying. He's lying. That's what I'm talking about. The ideology is trumping, odd use of terms, I guess, but yes, is overpowering principle. He is an anti-oil and gas guy just as much as Trudeau was, if not more. But he's willing to lie to get into power. And then he'll say, I'm going to get that pipe to the coast, but he won't. As long as C-69 is there, it'll be strangled and mired up in regulation and BS, and it'll never get done. You need somebody who's actually going to get it done, and that's not Carney. So if we do want to insulate yourself more from Trump, fine. Well, that looks like Poilievre's the person to do it because you want to get that increased access out there. Likewise, another area that not enough people have talked about, I wrote about that in a past column elsewhere, is our ports. I mean, if you're talking about exporting anything from Canada, it's got to go through a port eventually. Canada's ports are terrible. Vancouver is notorious, one of the most inefficient ports in the world, actually. One of the worst. A lot of Canadian products get shipped down to Seattle and then brought up by train because Vancouver is so bad. Why is it so bad? Well, corruption, Teamsters Union, Longshoremen's Union, they got some serious issues at that port. I don't know if Poilievre will have the courage to take that on, but I tell you what, somebody's going to have to. And somebody's going to take on those corrupt unions, fighting the automation and causing a lot of problems in those ports. And, it's not going to become a campaign issue this time around. But if either of those two, between Poilievre and Carney, are going to have the courage to take on the unions, I will put my money on Poilievre. You got to remember, Carney's beholden now to the NDP vote that fell his way. The NDP are just courting the porn stars, I guess, now. All right. Well, that's enough for today, guys. It's been quite a week. Be sure to keep tuning into all the Western Standard channels and share this stuff out there, guys. Get it to other folks and, keep the independent media rolling. We got Nigel putting shows out. We've got Sean got a new show coming out. Derek's got stuff coming out. Keep on the Western Standard. We're going to have an election special on election night, of course. We'll be there covering the stuff live as it comes in one way or another. Make sure to tune in that evening. And just keep supporting independent media. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. Thanks for the comments and the questions. And I will see you all again on my show on Wednesday next week.
What does success mean to you? Peace of mind? Financial freedom? Generational wealth? What do you see in your future? Investing in gold and silver can help you get there. Through our trading partners, New World Precious Metals offers safe, affordable, secure international accounts to help you meet your unique financial goals. Connect with one of our experienced team members. Invest in gold and silver today.